Another vexation for Rishi Sunak, his plans to curtail Islamist organisations and hate preachers by broadening the definition of extremism risks ensnaring unrelated rights groups. So, is this a welcome plan of action or a threat to free speech in Britain? I'm rejoined by Deputy Political Editor at The Sun, Ryan Saby. Ryan, they've got themselves into a real kind of quagmire here, haven't they? Because everybody who talks about freedom of speech says there's plenty of rules in place. They can easily control these hate preachers. They've done it in the past when they've wanted to. They've banned people from coming here from other countries when they've wanted to. And they've kicked people out when they've wanted to. So why are they getting themselves in this muddle?
No, exactly. And I think one of the problems is that one of the definitions they're trying to come up with is whether this undermines or overturns British values.
Right.
And some would argue that the Scottish National Party would come into this. Now, right. I mean, that is very, very extreme.
Right.
But it just means, where do you draw the line?
Right.
So I think there is this really difficult and this question and answer session going on in government at the moment about how broad does that definition go, and that's why this decision is meant to be out in the next few weeks or so. But
yes.
That's just why ministers are scratching their heads over it.
And is it being kind of looked upon as a method by which to stop the marches? Is that kind of what they're trying to do?
I think there's a little bit of that, but I think that the things that are getting slightly sort of confused slightly over this, in that Rishi Sunak, I think what he was trying to get to was not only is the sort of the overview of the hate marches and what people were saying, but actually the individual MPs that are being targeted, the council leaders, and they should not sort of undermine our democracy. So I think that's one of the things that Rishi Sunak was trying to get to, and that kind of mob rule aspect.
Right.
So
because we saw a terrible tweet today, didn't we? Andrea Jenkins published it, that somebody had sent her. Not clear who it came from. Hopefully the police are going to get involved and hopefully find whoever it was that sent it. But a really nasty, horrible tweet involving threats to her child and all sorts of other things. And I'm sure that many MPs would show you similar stuff that they get as well. But it seems to me that, once again, Rishi Sunak made the big speech, grandstanding outside Downing Street on Friday. But, is he actually going to do anything?
Well, this is the trouble. I think when you looked at that speech, there was plenty of, I'd say, language in there. He talked, it was a very well written piece. But the trouble is, what was the action?
Right.
What was he'd spoken to the police chiefs earlier in the week, but actually in that speech, was there any sort of new policy in there? And he said, I'll back the police. But the trouble is, of course he's going to back the police on whatever they do in doing this, if they're going to be sort of a bit more hard line and do what he says. But it's a difficult one, especially on that broad definition of extremism.
But also the genie's out of the bottle, isn't it? Because it's all very well saying to these marching, thousands, well, you can't do it anymore. But what do you think is going to happen then? You think they're just going to go, oh, well, we won't bother? Well, they're going to turn up in their thousands, and the police are going to go, there's too many of them, there's more of them than there are of us, and they're going to do nothing.
No, absolutely. And when he made that speech, you just felt that all those people, those protesters, those demonstrators who've been forever marching, you have that right to protest and demonstrate in this country. They turned around and said, well, it's not going to stop us.
Right.
So I think that's why he's trying to make the point that, there should be sort of harsher punishments handed out to people who do target MPs. I mean, just the other day I saw a video of Just Stop Oil, and one of their protesters actually turning up outside Keir Starmer's house.
Yes, I saw that.
And then you had the comments from Chris Packham.
Putting something through the letterbox.
Absolutely.
Like
then you had Chris Packham, the environmentalist. He was talking this week of how you could demonstrate outside an MP's house, but obviously if it's peaceful.
Yeah.
The trouble is, do we really want those people, anyone going outside an MP's house?
I don't think that's right.
You have to draw the line somewhere.
I don't think that's right, but equally, do you want somebody who suggests that being arrested and dragged into a cell because you call him an extremist?
Yeah, no, it's not. I
mean, Chris Packham is many things. I don't think he's an extremist.
No, absolutely.
I think he's a bit of an idiot, but that's not an arrestable offence yet in this country.
Yeah, and he believes strongly in what he does. But how far can these people push it? And how far do you want to push them every time, just to sort of coax them along?
And looking at some of the various different organisations which governments, and particularly local governments, have been involved with: the Muslim Council of Britain, Palestine Action, Muslim Engagement and Development, who I'm pretty sure are the people that Baroness Vorsi has mentioned in the past as kind of framing the definition of Islamophobia. These are all groups that are quite well embedded into things like the Metropolitan Police. They go to them for advice.
Yeah.
Now you're going to be saying, all right, you can't go to these groups. I mean, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but they would literally have to completely change root and branch how public sector operations operate.
Yeah, the Ministry of Defence a link to these these organisations. It's basically you'd have to go through every single sort of contract or written agreement that you have with these and sort of rip it up and start again.
Well, what about, I mean, we talked about George Galloway earlier on today. What about his organisation, the Workers' Party of Britain? Chris Williamson has already been, I think, questioned by the police about some of the things he said on election night in Rochdale and things that he said since. I mean, he looks like an extremist to me.
It also brings up the question on public money and whether if someone is connected or convicted or is spoken to by the police or arrested, those MPs who do go to Westminster, do they actually still receive that public funding? It's you could have hundreds of thousands of pounds going to them.
So what's the actual process at the moment then? Are they trying to draw up some form of this?
So Michael Gove is actually trying to come up with this definition, and I think as a result of that, you'll then have a subsection of a number of organisations. I mean, this could run to list hundreds of
prescribed extremist organisations.
Not prescribed is at the top end of it, but there will certainly be a list of, as I say, it could be dozens, it could be hundreds. Depends how many are there around the country. They feel, come within that broad definition.
Sounds like an absolute nightmare.
It is a minefield.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. Good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.